Moncton Wildcat star Caleb Desnoyers. Could he be a fit for the Blackhawks at number 3? Mario Tirabassi, what kind of player is Caleb Desnoyers?
He is a player that you win with. Plays down the middle. He's got the ideal size at 6'2", about 175, 180 pounds, and is a guy that has that two-way game, that he's effective in all zones. He's put out in all situations. For Moncton this season, he was the driver of their offense and one of their most effective, if not the most effective forward defensively that they had. He's a guy that is built for an NHL game. He's built to be an NHL center. And I think one of the knocks against him is that nothing he does is super elite dynamic, but everything he does is good. Like everything he does is what you would want. He's been described as a coach's dream. It just doesn't feel like he has that next gear that puts him up there in that discussion to be like, oh, would he actually be like 1 or 2? He's kind of floating in that like 5-6 range, but at 3, I don't think it's too out of the question for the Blackhawks to consider him.
So every time a player is interviewed, he is asked, is there a player that you model your game after? And Caleb Desnoyers says, I model my game after Jonathan Toews. He says it in an interview with TSN. And what you're describing
That's what we want to hear.
Jonathan Toews. Highly skilled, but was never going to lead the league in scoring. Really made his mark by being excellent at everything without being super fast, perfect hands. You know, he wasn't Pavel Bure or Pavel Datsyuk or any Pavel you want to name. He was just really good at every element of hockey, and that's what Denoyer is. So the question is, do you look at what you have in the system and say, this is something we need? A 200-foot committed, bona fide center. Maybe you sacrifice a little bit of a scoring ceiling that you might get with Misa, or you might get with Higgins or some other, maybe even Martone. Do you sacrifice that to get the all-around Crosby, Kopitar, Taves, Bergeron type level of two-way play? I think when you look at things and you've got Connor Bedard already, who is supposed to be the guy who is a numbers collector in his prime, should be in the 100-point area every year. That's the expectation. It was when he was drafted. Maybe it's tempting to take a player like this to make sure you're strong down the middle, which you have to be to win championships. We've seen that over and over again. Maybe you get out of the best player available and take for need here. And I wouldn't hate it. I think the opportunity might exist if the Hawks wanted Caleb Desnoyers as their guy to maybe trade down a couple spots. I know that would probably not make Hawks fans happy, but that can't be Kyle Davidson's focus right now. He needs to build a roster that can compete with just look at the teams in the playoffs right now.
Yeah.
Florida. You've got Edmonton, Dallas. Like, these teams are strong down the middle, 200-foot players. The Hawks have a big hole in that category right now. So someone like Denoyer could fill that role, but you might have to get comfortable with reaching a little bit for a guy that fills a need, and that's really never been Kyle Davidson's MO.
Yeah, and I think too, the idea of trading back to still get him is interesting, because you look at, after the Hawks, you have the Mammoth, you have the Flyers. Like, there are teams that also need centers.
Right.
There are teams that also need like a guy exactly like him. So that'd be kind of a gamble unless you're communicating with one of those teams and say, hey, we want to move back X amount of spots, and get a sense of who they want to get and know that he's still going to be there. That's part of the deal. But I think that's a risk that if you just want your guy, go and get him, especially at number 3. There's really I don't think there's a lot of options to like go back and still get your guy, because this draft is wide open. Like, we could see any multitude of a combination of players 1 through 5.
Yeah.
So I think you look at it, and the Hawks do have a couple players in their system that I think at their ceiling would be like number 2 centers. Like, you look at Sasha Boisvert, Frank Nazar. Like, if he's behind Bedard, that's a solid number 2 center. But his ceiling might be higher than we even thought. So he might be a guy that like is a top line wing. And you look at Ryan Green, you have Oliver Moore figuring out if he's a center or a wing, but they seem like guys that like at their best are a good number 2 center. And Denoyer, I feel like his ceiling isn't as high as a Higgins or a Misa, but I think his floor is very high.
Yeah.
And I hate to use the term safe pick, but it feels like a guy like him who maybe he's not topping out at the, number 1 franchise center, but if he's bottoming out as very good second line center, you kind of feel comfortable with that kind of projection and that kind of player. And, you look at the season he had in Moncton this year. He led the team in scoring, well over a point per game player,
and was significantly younger than most of his teammates.
Right? Yeah. For a guy to do that as in his draft year is really impressive. Led them to a QMJHL championship. Was the QMJHL playoffs MVP. He's playing in the Memorial Cup right now as we record this. He's been a gold medalist with Team Canada at the U18 World Juniors, gold medalist with Team Canada at the Holinka Gretzky Cup. Like the guy, you find success with him. Right. Like he is a winner. And I really like players that have that experience at this level. The Hawks have a prospect system full of players who have been junior league champions, NCAA, all-stars and champions of their conferences, and guys that have been captains. Like he checks all those boxes. Like I get excited about it, and it's crazy to think like it could feel like a quote unquote reach, but it just kind of goes by how the Blackhawks put their board. Like, yeah, maybe in the public he's a 5, 6, 7 prospect, but the Hawks could have him at number 2 behind Michael Misa for say. And if Misa's off the board at 1 or 2, if their next best guy is Denoyer, you could get him, and you're not like sacrificing anything.
We had this conversation a little bit too with Porter Martone, where maybe not the third best player, but when you look at organizational need, he fills a role. I think when they've got so many draft picks made over the last few years, with more to come, 2 first-round picks this year, you are finally in a position where you can kind of pick for need and say, look, we lack this a little bit, and while maybe this guy's a little bit better or is going to have better numbers, we need this kind of player. And, the way Jeff Blashill has spoken about the commitment to playing winning hockey, what he calls winning hockey. Denoyer plays winning hockey. That is the very definition of what we're talking about, is a guy who, even at 18 years old, is committed to playing hockey at all ends, finishes checks, steals pucks, and yeah, he might not take you out of your seat with a highlight reel goal all the time, but if he's going to be the Jonathan Taves to Connor Bedard's Patrick Kane, that's a really good start on your top 6.
That's how those teams, at the top of their forwards group, that's how they were built. So
we talk about, before we wrap up, we talk about floor. And I think about a guy who Hawks fans are very familiar with, put up huge number in junior, Dave Boland. A little bit smaller. Denoyer is 6'2". Boland was 6 foot. And, Boland's kind of scrawny. He always has been, but he plays big.
Yeah. Played with that edge.
I would imagine that the floor for Caleb would be Dave Boland.
Yeah, I think that's not bad. And I think Boland had, when he got to the NHL, developed that edge of, he played a little bit higher in the lineup because he could play that style and he could play that agitator while still being effective as a two-way center. I've kind of had some ideas of, is Caleb Desnoyers prime Braden Shen? Is he, in his prime Jordan Staal? Is he Sean Monahan? Like those are guys that I feel like in recent years, seeing them and their contributions,
they're good names.
Like those guys have been very important to successful teams,
and they play an unsexy game, but a massively important game, and that's why a lot of those guys that you named still playing in the NHL.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So yeah, I mean, it is a tempting pick. Look, I'm at the point now where just about a month away, I think exactly a month away actually, from the NHL draft. I can be talked into pretty much any of these forwards.
Oh, yeah.
So just to wrap up, Caleb Desnoyers, 6'2", 180, in 56 games with Moncton, 35 goals, 49 assists, 84 points. Could be an intriguing prospect for the Chicago Blackhawks.